In ghost towns out in the American West and many tourist destinations in the mountains, there's a touristy pastime that mimics some of the history of the gold rush known as panning for gold. These days, panning for gold starts with muddy rocks, water, and a pan. People put small amounts of the gunk in a pan and shake it around and flow water through it, looking for tiny bits that sparkle and shine. Half the fun is knowing that something great could be hiding in there, like a little emerald or maybe even a decent sized nugget of gold. Rather than resort to the cliches about editing being a slog, let's think of editing our writing as a chance to pan for the gold, getting rid of anything that isn't the best stuff. And great editing techniques are what help our writing truly shine. Hi, I'm Dr. Emily Zarka, and this is Study Hall, Rhetoric, and Composition. We've mentioned it a couple times in other spots in this series, but it's important to clarify that editing and revision are different steps in the writing process, at least the way we're talking about them. Revision is all about the big picture or content-driven changes in our writing, while editing is a final refinement of the entire picture so it will be the best it can be for the audience. And while we've talked about editing before, here we want to give you even more specific techniques for making editing your own. We've used the analogy of pottery before, where revision is where we're still adding handles, shaping the spout, and changing other functions of the vessel. Editing would be more like the glaze we use that makes it attractive to the person who will buy it. Much of the editing is focused on clarity, often at the granular level of spelling and punctuation. A misplaced comma can be the difference between inviting grandma to have dinner and cannibalism. So revision and editing complement each other. In revision, we set up the meaning that we want our audience to take away. And in editing, we're making sure that we've done all we can to make that meaning clear. This distinction is important. We need to determine what meaning we're trying to convey before we can work on clarifying that meaning. We don't want to spend time putting in missing commas if we aren't sure what we're trying to express. All this to say that some of our editing techniques actually require us to stop focusing on the meaning of the work at all, and instead to focus on our own understanding of style, grammar, and formatting. Because by focusing on the details of language, we ensure that meaning is conveyed effectively. Let's start with style. When we edit for style, we're making sure that word choice, voice, and tone are consistent and fit our audience. Then there's editing for grammar, which means making sure that our writing follows the rules for written language. While that sounds straightforward, there's just this one thing. People disagree on what the rules are. So instead of strictly adhering to rules set down by a stern but well-intentioned English teacher, we make sure our writing follows the rules of language our audience expects. By ensuring that the style is consistent and the grammar makes sense, we give our writing the best chance of conveying the meaning we intended it to. So how do we do this? Essentially, when we edit for style and grammar, we're taking care of outlier and systematic mistakes. In this course, outlier mistakes are what many of us would think of as typos. They're mistakes that we made because we glanced at a fancy car going by our window when we were writing, or because our typing skills failed us briefly and our spell check didn't catch the incorrect letter in that word. Two great ways to find outlier mistakes are to read aloud and to read backwards. Reading aloud is pretty straightforward. Most of us read faster when we read in our heads silently, and reading aloud slows us down, ideally helping us to catch more items than we'd catch otherwise. If we have access to a friend who can read along with us, or a writing center where a writing tutor or consultant can read with us, we may catch even more of those outlier mistakes. They won't have seen the writing before and might see errors that our eyes slide right past. It can also be useful to have screen reader software read our paper aloud to us. If we type an extra G or M in the middle of a word, the screen reader will probably come up with some wonky pronunciation that can alert us to the mistake. Another way to see our work in a different light sounds very odd, but go with me. We read our paper backwards, sentence by sentence. So don't read the words in reverse order, but read the last sentence, then the second to last sentence, then the third to last sentence, and so on, all the way to the beginning of the paper. This takes our focus off of how the paper flows overall. Flow is important, but when we're trying to catch things like misspelled words or incorrect tense, we don't want to get into the familiar rhythm of the paper we've worked on and miss something. But other mistakes are things that we think of as right or that we mistake all the time. These are what we're calling systematic or patterned mistakes, like the difference between its, its, and its, it''s. But making systematic mistakes doesn't mean we're bad at grammar. Most of us learn a ton of grammatical conventions unconsciously as we pick up a language and practice different ways of speaking and writing. By the time we're writing for a college course or work project, we actually know a lot of grammar and style. But sometimes that knowledge of grammar falls short or isn't aligned with the grammatical conventions our audience is expecting. So, to make sure we resolve systematic mistakes, we can employ the editing techniques of identifying patterns of error and conducting quick skims for specific issues. Patterns of error are mistakes we make over and over. Maybe our science teacher has mentioned that we need to use third-person perspective because that's the typical standard for journal article writing, saying this researcher did this. But we keep using first person, I did this. Sure, just learning the style of the writing helps. But if we have a grammatical habit that's hard to break, it's worthwhile just to know this is one of our issues and look for it during editing. For any given kind of writing, we can note our own patterns of error simply by looking at feedback from a teacher, boss, or even a friend. If they see that we've made the same kind of mistake several times, we might have a habit in how we express ourselves in writing that our audience would feel is incorrect. The way we solve this is through quick skims or rereads of our work where we're just looking for that one thing, be it the Oxford comma or first person versus third person voice. Rereading our work a bunch of times for all the patterns of error we know we may have may sound time consuming, but when we're looking for only one thing, this kind of focused rereading tends to go very quickly. What's more is that if we're using a word processor to type, many of them have a find feature. So we can type in a word, phrase, or punctuation mark, and it will show us all the times that it appears in our paper. Let's say, purely hypothetical, that I've gotten into a bad habit of using way too many exclamation points. I know that my boss finds them unprofessional, but when I'm drafting, my fingers just keep hitting Shift and 1 on my keyboard. I can quickly skim for them and replace them with periods quite easily. Or better yet, I can type an exclamation point into the find feature to see all the places in an email where there are exclamation points. Then I can replace each one with a period. Maybe I can leave one exclamation point in at the spot where it's most needed. Something really cool happens when we edit well for both outlier and systematic mistakes. We teach ourselves the kind of things that are most likely to be our issues, and often we'll grow to avoid these issues when drafting. But if a particular rule never becomes second nature, that's okay too. The techniques we've covered help us deliver a more polished piece of writing, even if certain grammatical or stylistic conventions never come naturally to us. And if we're worried that editing is not just our strong suit, a great way to train our editing muscles is to visit a writing center at a college or have a friend who likes editing read our papers. Visiting a writing center and showing someone else your work can be intimidating if you haven't done it before. So here's how that might look. Samaya's friend Jaden works at the writing center as a writing consultant. When Samaya mentions that her education theory professor is really focused on polished, well-formatted final lesson plans, Jaden asks if she'd like to read through her revised paper together and work on some final editing. Samaya is thrilled to give it a shot. Jaden explains that this particular writing center tends to have a consultant and writer sit right next to each other with the paper between them. Together, they read the paper aloud, alternating paragraphs with each other. This way, they both get to hear how the paper sounds when they're reading it, and the shifting voices also keep them focused. At one point, Samaya is reading out loud, and she stumbles over a couple sentences, even though she wrote them. Jaden responds by saying, sometimes when we stumble while reading aloud, it means there's a simpler or better way to say what we mean. Can you say what you mean out loud? Samaya explains what those sentences mean while Jaden writes down what she's saying. After a couple tweaks, Samaya likes the new sentences much better. At various points, Samaya corrects her own typos and notices sentences that clearly convey the meaning she wanted them to. Then a few pages in, Jaden points out how they've once again identified the use of comma where there really should be a new sentence or a semicolon. They look at the 3 times this has happened, and that helps Samaya understand which kinds of sentences accidentally turn into run-ons. When they finish going over the lesson plan, Samaya feels more confident in her own ability to read her papers aloud when she needs to edit. She also enjoyed the experience of seeing the paper through Jaden's eyes and learning about her own patterns of error. She'll be back at the Writing Center for the next lesson plan assignment to continue her growth. While there are some folks who genuinely find editing itself to be a joyful task, many of us have to get our enjoyment of this stage of the writing process from the valuable results we gain. Often when we're training ourselves to catch style and formatting issues, we're joining a community of learning. What I mean by that is that part of how we absorb style is just by getting really immersed in the customer service team at work or by writing our final senior paper in anthropology in a way that other anthropologists will understand. We use spacing, headings, citation, and other formatting and style choices to make our writing familiar and recognizable to the small community where our work will be read the most. And when it comes to grammar, we can get better at identifying patterns of error while still recognizing that our own unique way of writing works for some audiences and not for others. Most of us don't always speak or write using perfect grammar all the time, but we all can learn how to best apply these editing tips to appease the most grammar stickler audiences. And that means we can all thrive in a lot of language situations. It's incredibly powerful to know the grammar preferences of our audiences and align our writing with them. But we're all evolving when it comes to how we write during drafting and what we need to put our attention into during editing. And language is evolving too. Developing good editing habits can also prepare us to adjust and grow when language expectations change or when we communicate with a different audience. As we become thoughtful, self-reflective editors, we can learn to love getting our points across well, and maybe even love editing itself. There's a bit of joy in seeing that tiny fix that will make our writing shine a little brighter. Thanks for watching Study Hall Rhetoric and Composition, which is part of the Study Hall Project, a partnership between ASU and Crash Course. If you liked this video and want to keep learning with us, be sure to subscribe. You can learn more about Study Hall in the videos produced by Crash Course and ASU in the links in the description. See you next time.